5. Alphonse. For one reason or another, open markets are associated with low prices. And in most cases, open markets are seasonal markets, the majority of the sellers being women, their foreheads gleaming with an extra layer of cheap vanishing cream. These sellers are experts at bargaining and their prices vary with customers. If you are in tattered or cheap clothes, you get a low price. But if you are in an expensive dress or suit, you are in for a higher price. Worse still, if you are white, you get a real high price. The sky is the limit, the argument being that since whites make money, it means they keep more of it, naturally, than they give to their African counterparts. If you are the kind of customer used to the open market system, you can easily take advantage of such price discrimination. All you have to do is be one of the early customers on market day and you won't do any haggling. Every seller will be mentioning a figure lower than her neighbors until the bottom price is reached. So on this particular Monday, Julia was one of the early customers from the city. She was in a very cheap dress to create the impression that she was financially miserable. She came alone, carrying an old, gaping basket. By the time other city dwellers came, Julia had almost bought everything she needed. Along with the city people came a regiment of middlemen whose sole aim was to buy everything from the women sellers and resell it at a higher price. They all sold the produce at a fixed price. No haggling. The leftovers were taken to the city markets where they would fetch an even higher price. One of these middlemen was Alphonse. He was dressed in an I-can-come-down pair of trousers and a fluffy overcoat. On his head sat a flat cap large enough to be mistaken for a saucer. Alphonse had 2 empty sacks with him and he was about to stop at a cabbage stand when he saw Julia staring at him as if in a daze. "Julie," he said, his face muscles creaking into a strained smile. Extending a hand to her, he strode forward. At first she wanted to ignore the hand, but all the same she took it. The hand was as cold as a frozen fish. "Ju," he said, his eyes trying to hold hers. Julia turned and made her way out of the market straight to her car. She knew Alphonse was going to follow her. So much the better, she had to talk to him. She placed the basket on the back seat and opened the passenger door for him. "What do you want, Alphonse? Why don't you leave me alone?" She spoke with unconcealed disgust, staring at him, not seeing him for she could only see a human shape which was threatening to destroy her life. Alphonse began, his expression grim, making him look like a vicious dog when it sees someone approaching its master's yard. "What do you want from me, Alphonse? Why don't you leave me alone?" she asked, her voice shrill. Alphonse, she soon found out, wanted money. A lot of it. "I don't have any money," she said, her mind full of questions. "Why come to me? Why have you been playing with my nerves on the phone? Why did you go to Dan?" "Find it," he rasped. "Find the money." He emphasized the last word as if to say, "I don't care how, you have no choice." There was silence. Julia was still staring at him. He stared back. They were like 2 dogs sizing each other up, who will attack first. Then Alphonse started talking. He told her that he spent 2 years in prison, living through the dreary night sitting up in his cell worried about his family. When he tried to get the prison warder to find out whether his mother knew which prison her son was in, the man snapped that it was not his job to look for prisoners' families. As far as he was concerned, each relative was made aware by the police as to which prison the prisoner was in. So if Alphonse's mother wasn't coming to see her son, was it his fault? So Alphonse spent long, cold hours worried stiff about the plight of his family. With his father in prison too, he couldn't see how his mother could look after the 6 children. Where would she get the money to feed them? Where would she get the money to pay for the rent, the electricity, the water? When he came out, he was told that his mother had married a South African truck driver and had gone with him to one of the homelands, taking the 2 youngest children with her, Numa and Goli. The rest of the family had been sent back to Malawi to their grandparents. Efforts to trace his mother failed and life in Mufokos proved tough for him. He shared a room with Shea in his father's house. The 2 young men soon ran into trouble again with the police a few months after their release when they tried to snatch a handbag from an elderly woman outside a supermarket. When they came out of prison again, It didn't take long for them to be picked up once more. This time they were involved in a drugs case. They had developed the habit of selling marijuana to the young tourists hanging about the hotel corridors. You could always spot a potential customer, long hair, dirty jeans, bearded and tired looking. After a series of arrests, Alphonse decided to quit Mufocos. Enough is enough. In fact, what prompted him to leave and try a job in the mines was the time the owner of the house they had broken into shot at them and wounded Shewa. He somehow got away safely and disappeared from Harare. But the mining job was no good and he would have been in trouble with the police if he hadn't decided to quit Zimbabwe forever. When he came home, he found his two sisters working as barmaids. One was a mother to twins, but she could not quite tell who their father was. And only one of his younger brothers was still at school. Fed up with village life, he sought a job on a tea plantation before moving into town to get a job as a doorman at the cinema. Right now, life was not easy for him, although he supplemented his wages by reselling vegetables at an exorbitant price after buying them at a giveaway price. All the same, life was not easy. It dawned on Julia that he was laying all the blame for his miseries on her. This became more obvious when Alphonse said, "If only you had lent me that $50 that day, my old man wouldn't have gone to prison." "But you refused. Your father wanted $100, not 50, she pointed out. 50 would have helped all the same, I say. The court would have given him an extension. It wasn't fair though to lay the blame on her, she thought, trying to shake the past out of her mind. You know, Ju, Alphonse said, lighting a handmade cigarette which had a strange odor. Could be marijuana, she thought, rolling down her window. All I'm saying is that if you had helped us that time, I wouldn't have broken into somebody's shop and I wouldn't have gone to jail. I would have gone on with education up to college where I'd have read law or literature. Good God, Alphonse. Can I tell you something? Julia said, turning to look at him, her face wooden. She could see him now. I'm a different Julia now. No longer that young standard 6 girl you exploited 12 or 13 years ago. I'm a grown-up with my own philosophy about life. I'm a married woman who intends to remain married forever and ever. I've been through hard life, but I've survived. So can we part now, as friends? Let's go our ways and forget the past. You've your own life, I've mine. Fine. It's not that easy, Ju, Alphonse replied. His face, she suddenly thought, reminded her of gangster films. Alphonse looked like a ruthless gang leader. What's not easy? Forgetting the past is not easy, particularly if you love children. His voice was almost a sinister whisper, making her shiver like a lightly dressed child on a cold rainy day in Harare. She sat back heavily as if hit on the breast. What do you mean? I mean, if you love a child, you have to love the father too. What do you mean? She asked again, breathing rapidly as if she had been running. I'm the father of your child. Surely, you wouldn't want me to lead a dog's life. There was no child, Alphonse, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know how you got wind of that pregnancy story. Who told you? Anyway, I had a miscarriage. In other words, there was no child. Does that satisfy you? Alphonse coughed twice and threw the stub of his cigarette out of the stationary car. He was thinking of his drunken father who was such a good man when sober. He recalled what his father had said while they were in Mufocos. His father had called his son aside and said, Alphonse, is it true that you are tampering with that Masamba girl called Julia? Your mother found a note in your pocket. No, sir, he had replied. You're 17, Alphonse, getting on to 18. It's dangerous, it's a dangerous age if you don't discipline whatever you have in your pants. The man had been smoking furiously as if he didn't like to discuss with his son anything that had to do with sex. Sir, you must avoid girls now or else you will make one of them pregnant. It's easy at your age. Keep away from them until some other time in future. You hear? Yes, sir. If you spoil somebody's daughter you will put us in trouble. Where would I get money for damages? Yes, sir. And one thing, don't let them fool you, he said this slowly, as if to make sure every word went home. Yes, sir. A sane man should never let himself be fooled by a woman, you hear? Yes, sir. That had been 12 or so years ago, but now Alphonse found himself recalling that sermon as if it had taken place just the previous day. Don't let them fool you. He brought his mind back to the present and said, a sane man should never let himself be fooled by a woman. Julia stared at him. What sane man? You can't fool me, babe. I know you well, Ju, too well. I'm a different person. That's what the chameleon says when it changes color, but does that make it a different chameleon, eh? Julia looked at her watch, grimaced, opened her handbag and fished out a 10-kwacha note. Here you are, Alphonse. Take it and let me alone, please. I owe you nothing. Alphonse looked at the money as if with contempt. Slowly his hand crept forward and took the note. Then again with deliberate slowness, his hand started tearing it into pieces. The next moment, he flung the door open and stepped out. I say, I'm giving you 2 days to consider my proposition. What proposition? Croaked Julia, who was still shocked at what he had just done with the money. You know what I'm talking about, he said, his eyes blazing now. No, she muttered, unable to believe that once upon a time she had offered her body to this repulsive creature standing by the car. Good God! You do, he thundered. Don't let them fool you. I said no. Let me just put it this way, if you don't give me 1,000 kwacha by Wednesday, I'll have an appointment with your husband, and you know what I'll say, eh? I'm sure he doesn't know anything about your relationship with me. Alternatively, Julia didn't want to listen anymore. It was as if the world had come to an abrupt standstill. Good God! She slammed the car into gear and zoomed away, the passenger door banging shut in due course.